Hey, how's everybody doing? My name is Christian Wagner, and I'm the Militant Thomist. So today we're going to be continuing that series that I've been doing on certainty. And right now we're going to be getting into the means of attaining certainty. So if you remember from the last video, which was a week or two ago, the first video I defined certainty and then I proved certainty. And now in this video, it's going to be more so going over those things which are contained in that necessary premise, which I've thus shown in the last video. And those are going to be those means by which we can reach that judgment of certainty, removing all reasonable doubt. I'm certain I am having a good time. So true, King. Hi, Christian. Hope all is well. Thank you, Ivan. So, but before we get into there, remember to go to patreon.com/militantthomist if you want access to PDFs, extra videos, the weekly chill stream that I do for patrons, and a lot of other stuff. And then also, if you go into the description below this video, you'll see that I've linked 2 books. And both of these books are extremely helpful when it comes to this question. So the first one, I think it's the first one I'm trying to remember, is going to be The First Principles of Knowledge by Rickaby. And that's going to be a very in-depth analysis and then refutation of certain theories of skepticism. And then the second one is going to be that a very minor sort of introductory work by Father Copens on logic. So it's going to be a textbook on logic that's in manual format and provides a very easy and very short introduction to the question. So I do reprint both of those. So if you buy them, I would be much appreciative because that is how I make money. So let's get right into it. Christian B. Morber, Sotro. This is going to be split into 2 parts. Oh my! Look, the other Paul put Morbius up there, and I didn't even notice. That's crazy. On the top right of the screen. How do I remove that? There you go. That's better. Man, I can't believe he got me. So I'm going to share my screen, and this is going to be split into 2 parts. And then the first one's going to be interior. So this is going to be talking about that interior certainty that we have in the intellect. The next is going to be exterior. So we're going to talk about things like our outward senses and the reliability of our senses. We're going to be talking about the reliability of authority, of witnesses. We're going to be talking about the reliability of a lot of things. And then all of this stuff, I feel like I shouldn't even have to. The very fact that I have to do these videos just shows the tendency of man to be dumb. Not really the tendency of man, really the tendency of intellectuals to be dumb. Because the very fact that I have to tell you guys and prove to you guys that we can have certainty about our own existence. And the very fact that there was people that sow doubt in people's minds about our the certainty we can have about things like our own existence. It's ridiculous because really all I'm doing right now is I'm just telling you common sense and then putting it in systematized language and then proving it and showing its relation between each one of these concepts. The very fact that I have to do these videos is just extremely depressing. So Lucas, I am certain that I'm having a good time. Well, I am having a very sad time right now because the very fact that the turn that Western philosophical culture has taken, that this is even an open question. Like the fact that we have certainty about our sense perceptions, like the very fact that I have to prove that to people is just idiotic. The very fact that that's a question. This is just so sad. It's so sad that we have to do that. But man is just forever trying to be unique and following a bunch of extremely idiotic ideas. Like seriously, just look around you. And this is going to be my rant sesh for a day. And we'll also talk about common sense next time. So this has to do a lot with common sense. Is look around you at like 90% of what's being said Well, 90% of what's being said that sounds ridiculous. And just consider it like people just need to think about what they're doing for like 30 seconds and they can realize that it's just stupid. It's just stupid. Like common the very fact that you have a brain and that you think about something for 2 seconds should make you realize that you need to stop. Like it's a question like whether I can read this book and understand what it's saying truly, where I can have a general certainty, removing any reasonable doubt about what this book says. Like that's just stupid. I pick up the book and I read it. And I know what it says. Like it's obvious. Like you're an idiot if you deny that. Like you should be thrown in a mental ward. You shouldn't be seen as a brilliant philosopher for coming up with these things. They're stupid. It's just ridiculous. Um, so I believe feminist philosophers have absolutely destroyed philosophy in America. Can women be philosophers? So there actually have been a few good female philosophers, but they're very few and far. They're very few and far between. Um, there's not many of them. And you want to know the reason behind this? Because when it comes to philosophy, while theology certainly takes the supernatural virtues, it's basically the virtue of faith, which is kind of mixed, you can say, informed by understanding in expressing the faith which resides within us. But when it comes to philosophy, philosophy takes a certain amount of natural virtue in order to be a good philosopher. That is extremely important. So when it comes to it being in accordance with one's nature, in a natural state, in an ordinary state, what you're going to have for women is especially going in living in accordance with a good system of moral philosophy, and just a basic Catholic ethics system that you can get in Copen's, for example, or Grenier, or really anybody, just any. There's like a million of them. What you're going to see when it comes to the role of women, like in 99.99% of the time, unless you have them being in a convent or something, or for some reason they have a special charism, which does happen. 99% of the time, it's going to be getting married at a relatively young age and then having children. That's going to be the virtuous life for them, being formed in virtue is the taking care of the household and the education of children. But whereas when it comes to what makes a good philosopher, um, what makes a good philosopher in the sense of scientific philosophy, um, it's going to take just a very long time of study, which is not going to be possible when it comes to the virtuous life of a woman. So in normal cases, no, it's not going to work out. But you might have like a super genius woman, which has happened in a few cases where they are not terrible. You also might have, in other cases, you might have a nun with a special charism to where she doesn't have that duty to husband and children who are going to be able to fulfill the precepts of being a good philosopher. But generally, no, no. Generally speaking, no, unless except in very small cases where it's otherwise. So yeah, but what happens when you get these women being philosophers is it's not. I don't think that it necessarily has to do with them being women, although that does have something to do about it because of if you read any good scholastic psychology, they'll tell you about the differences between men and women when it comes to intellectual contemplation. The fact that women aren't necessarily geared towards producing a good academic work. It's just the way it is. So just seething cope. Anybody listening who's getting mad, but where was I? I feel like I was. Oh, yeah. So it doesn't necessarily have to do with the fact that they're women, although that does have to do something with it. But I would say it more so has to do with the fact of that lack of virtue. So yeah, yeah. So example, Eva Braun. Where is she? She's at St. John's College, Annapolis. I thought about going there, but wait. She immigrate up, born of a Jewish family. Okay. Early life. Interesting. The emperor has no clothes and his advisors are at the philosophy department. Yes. I'm trying to. Edith Stein is also another good one. I always mix up my female German philosophers. But yes, she was the reason behind her being very based was the fact that she was a nun. I'm trying to think of the other one I'm thinking of where her husband was an extremely good philosopher, and she was just the reason she was so good is because she was just super smart. I'm trying to think about, bro. What does Aristotle say about women and their nature? I don't know. What does he say? Maybe Alice von Hildebrand. That's who it is. That's who I was thinking of. Alice von Hildebrand. Was it? Let me think. Yeah, so those Edith, so Hildebrand. I think it's her that I'm thinking of. Actually, yes, it is her that I'm thinking about. Yes, Dietrich von Hildebrand's wife. That is who I'm thinking of. Yes. So yes. So the reason why Alice von Hildebrand was a good philosopher is because she was just like freaking brilliant. It had nothing to do with her being like crazy or anything like that. But the reason behind Edith Stein was because she was a nun. So I think those are kind of the two premier examples. She was an outspoken critic of feminism. Very based. Yeah, so they're very rare. They're very, very rare. Okay, but we will actually get into what we're supposed to talk about. Commenting for a cool shout out. Bellator Theologiae. Theologiae. I don't know why I said Theologiae. Are you saying that Oprah isn't one of the philosophers of our age? So true. My intro political philosophy professor was a base traditional Catholic and has like 6 children, including a newborn. The Blessed Virgin Mary is the greatest philosopher of all time, and other than that, women should keep their silence. Well, it's the problem with making a statement like that is that you're equivocating on the word philosopher. Is that when it comes to like the act, I would say the habit of philosophizing, or the habit of even of being a theologian. Like obviously, the Blessed Virgin Mary is going to exceed all others when it comes to the depth of her contemplation because of the exuberance of her virtue. But she wouldn't like make a good like intro to philosophy professor or anything like that. They will claim that Kendrick Lamar is a modern day philosopher. Okay, I promise 15 minutes in, enough shenanigans. I'm not looking at the comments for a few minutes. We're going to get into the means of attaining certainty. Okay, so in general, there are 2 means of attaining certainty. So first we have direct means of attaining certainty, which are going to be our cognitive powers, and then indirect means of attaining certainty, which is going to be the authority of others. And then under direct means, it can be intellect, which is going to be interior. And then also common sense is interior, although I'll be covering it under exterior for some reason. And then, well, because common sense has to, that's why I'm covering under exterior, because common sense has to do a lot about the agreement of many people. So, and then also sensation is going to be exterior. It's going to be our senses, which are going to kind of reach out to the outward world. So those are kind of the basic divisions: direct, indirect, interior, exterior, when it comes to the way in which we are going to attain certainty. So first, with the intellect. So the intellect is the means by which certainty is achieved, since certainty is an intellectual state. So all of these above are going to relate somehow to our intellect. Even indirect, you can say, when it comes to our judgment of the reliability of the other person, we're still going to be in some sense relating to our intellect. So the senses are what furnish the matter of the judgments of the intellect, since all things come from sense perception. So it involves the certainty, 1, of consciousness, 2, of our primary ideas, 3, of immediate analytical judgments, 4, of the intellectual memory, and 5, of the reasoning process. That's going to make up the certainty of the intellect. And it kind of goes from most basic to more complex. And then we're going to be going over each one of these 5 in detail. So concerning consciousness. So consciousness is the reflect perception of our own acts, that is, of ourselves as acting. So to say that we have certainty concerning our consciousness is to say that I know, basically. That's going to be. So we know that we have certainty itself. So the thesis is going to be the reliability of consciousness is including in our capacity to know truth. So you can't separate the argument. The thesis is going to be that you cannot separate that self-evident axiom, which we went over last video, that we can know truth, from implicitly contained in there is that that idea that we have reliability of consciousness. So the capacity to know truth is a self-evident axiom, as stated in last video. Since this is a self-evident axiom, it is something that we know and have certainty of by definition. Something which is self-evident is something which we have certainty about. Therefore, it is something we are conscious of. So since consciousness is that reflect perception of our own acts, so since we have that reflect perception that we know truth, because something which is self-evident is something which we know, and since that axiom is about ourselves, necessarily, by consequence, what we're going to come to is that consciousness is something that is self-evident by necessary connection with that premise. So it's self-evident axiom to us. And therefore, we have that knowledge of our own knowledge, so to speak, that reflect knowledge, as the axiom is self-evident. And therefore, we have consciousness, because that is what is consciousness by definition. So it is only through consciousness that we know our own intellectual acts. Therefore, if consciousness were not reliable, we cannot really know whether we are eliciting acts of knowledge. And then when it comes to those categories within consciousness, what we have just proven, consciousness covers the following objects of knowledge. So first, our own existence. Second, the existence of our intellectual acts. Then third, the existence of our internal sense and of its acts. So by the very fact that we have consciousness, those 3 are now covered. So second, concerning primary ideas. So primary ideas, which are going to, if you want to know more about this, in the beginning of Father Copen's textbook on logic, he's going to go over in great detail what primary ideas are. But generally speaking, primary ideas are those ideas which are formed by the intellect of what exists. So universally and abstractly, such as being, truth, color, size, cause, etc. So when it comes to those concrete iterations of certain things, let's say, I have these two things right here, these two matchboxes. I have my big matchbox and I have my small matchbox. So with these two matchboxes, I look at them and I'm like, okay, this is a matchbox, a concrete individual matchbox. This right here, I look at it, okay, look at it, consider. This is a concrete matchbox too. So these two concrete matchboxes, I would say, okay, in consideration of my intellect, I'm going to say that these two are two individuals of a single species, or two species of the same genus. So from this, I've considered that primary idea of genus. And I also can consider, even more simply, if I have this pen, I have this book, say, okay, this pen is a being, this book is a being, therefore, boom, that I from these two concrete iterations of being, I have now that abstract notion of being, which is common to these two. So these primary ideas, existing universally and abstractly, those things are going to be objectively true, and that would mean that they're conformable to objects really existing. So those very basic ideas that don't exist concretely, but which mean don't exist. They don't exist concretely, but they in the mind are conformable to concrete iterations of the universal. So the proof of this is, if these ideas were not objectively true, not conformable to objects really existing, our commonest knowledge would be an illusion. If, for instance, being, truth, substance, etc., were mere figments of the imagination or of the intellect, we could never know anything, therefore they are objectively true. So this must be contained in that self-evident axiom that we can know truth. So from the very fact that we can know truth, we have to have these primary ideas as objectively true, or it would just destroy any notion of our ability to know truth. Because if I can't have that simplest notion of being, then I can't really be said to have any other notion of truth. Because how can I know, like, this pen if I don't have a notion of being? That would just be stupid. So analytical judgments. So we can also have certainty about those. So a judgment and an analytical judgment is, analytical judgment is a judgment wherein a perception of the meaning of the idea leads to the perception of an agreement or disagreement between a subject and a predicate. So now we are combining those first ideas, which are in the mind, or those first ideas with certain things out in the world. So an example of this is that a part is not greater than a whole. Or if I said that this, I don't know. Let's see what I can find. Ooh, this book right here is a being. There you go. This book is a being. That would be an analytical judgment. I am having an agreement between the subject of that, which is this book, and the predicate, which is being. So that is a mix between something which is concrete, something which is abstract, something which is particular, something which is universal. I'm saying that this is a particular, although we don't speak in this way properly, but because being isn't a genus, but this is a specific, I guess you could say, iteration of a being. So the thesis, which is going to be presented here, is that immediate analytical judgments can never be false. Now notice these immediate analytical judgments are going to not be, like I said, between something which is concrete and abstract, something which is from sensory, and then something which is from intellectual, but this is going to be between two primary ideas. So it would be like if I said part and whole are primary ideas which exist in the intellect. So the first proof is that this is made evident by considering their very nature, for they consist in affirming or denying explicitly what the very idea of the subject contained or excluded implicitly. Thus, all immediate analytical judgments do no more than affirm or deny explicitly what the subject of them contained or excluded implicitly before the judgment was formed. So that's just a fancy way of saying that when it comes to our ideas of comparing and forming judgments based on those first ideas that we have, all we are doing when we do that is just bringing out what's already there. So if we can know what a part is, and if we can know what a whole is, we're bringing out that implicit relation which exists between the two. And implicitly contained in partness is the fact that it is not greater than wholeness. So proof number 2 is that our intellect has the power to know truth. Therefore, that can give us real certainty, which is implied in the capacity for intellect to know truth, or which must be objectively true if the intellect can know truth at all. But such are these judgments. For if our intellect could not be relied on in these judgments, then the intellect could never be relied on in any judgments, for none are more evident. So remember, when we went back and thought about certainty, it's going to be a certain judgment. So these are the most basic. These analytical judgments are the most basic of judgments. So if we cannot have certainty about these judgments, then we really can have no certainty about any judgments. So we know that we have certainty about judgments, therefore we know that we can have certainty about these most basic judgments. So next, memory. So this is going to be like Cartesian, world was created 5 seconds ago, and then it's all like fake and stuff. Yeah. So thesis 8, we all know what memory is, so I don't really need to even go into it. But thesis 8, the reliability of our memory is contained in our power to know truth. So we do not maintain that we can recall all our former perceptions, but simply that when our memory does recall a former perception and judges, and this and is very important here, and judges with certainty that the object now recalled is identical with an object perceived before, it is reliable in such a judgment. So bringing our memory in judgment of certain things before us, we can have reliability when we reflect upon that the certainty of that process, that we are going to certainly have a true ability to recall an identity between an object before us and an object before. So if I think about, okay, I'm not even going to look at them. So I think about my Summa. I think that I remember that they are books. And then I have this book right here before me. I am making that certain judgment that this book is a book just as those books are books. So I'm remembering that this is like those. Or if I turn around and look at them, they were just as I remembered them. These objects that I just looked at are the same objects as the objects that I had looked at before. I don't know. Maybe earlier today I was just looking at my Summa. I was just gazing and contemplating its beauty. That is the way in which memory works. So the proof is going to be that is included in the intellect's power to know truth, without which all connected thought and expression of thought would be impossible. But the reliability of our memory is such, for unless our memory were reliable, we could not think connectedly, since one judgment would be forgotten before another could be compared with it. And no thought could be expressed because no words could be remembered to express them. So what's going to happen is that in the process of our thinking, we have what's called discursive reasoning. So we go from premise to conclusion, premise to conclusion, premise to conclusion, premise to conclusion. You go from one to one to one to one to one to one. We don't have like the angels and like the divine mode of intellection. We don't have this instantaneous sort of perception of cause and effect, and we don't instantly perceive, but rather we go step by step by step by step by step. That's just how we reason. That's why we have syllogisms and such. But since there is that discursive reasoning, And since we are temporal creatures, and since we, from the beginning to the end of our syllogism, there is that lapse of time, we have to keep certain ideas in our memory and then recall them at certain points in the reasoning process, the process of acquiring knowledge. So, since we have this temporal process, unless we had reliable memory, then any sort of power to know truth would be completely gone. And this is absurd because we showed in the last video that it is a self-evident axiom that the very reliability of our memory is contained in that axiom that we know truth. But there is an objection which is brought before us. So we often misremember things. So you have misremembered a certain thing that you learned a while ago, and you were just wrong. But in reply to this, what we have to consider is what I strongly emphasized before. If you go back into this, the dot under the first dot, the bullet point of the first bullet point, that we do not maintain that we recall all our former perceptions, but simply that when our memory does recall a former perception and judges with certainty that the object now recalled is identical with an object perceived before, it is reliable in such a judgment. So we have to be careful with our memory because from the very fact of time, our memory fades. Um, in the use of our memory, in saying that this object before, we judge it to be like the object now before us as the object before in time that we had seen before. If we make a rash judgment, then it is going to be reliable because we don't have that process of making sure that our memory is as it is now. So it's from the misuse and abuse of memory rather than its proper use. But the thesis only claims the proper use in its reliability. So next is going to be reasoning, and I think this is the last one. No, we have reasoning and then inner sense. So the ninth thesis is that reasoning is reliable. So this is going to be a very easy thing to prove. First, because I don't think you're going to have anybody who says that reasoning. Oh, sorry. Oh, reasoning is unreliable because that'd just be the silliest thing you'd ever hear. They wouldn't even be able to like speak to you. But when it comes to reasoning being reliable, we know that all logical reasoning is based on this principle that the conclusion is implicitly contained in the premises. Hence, he who would grant the premises and deny the conclusion would thereby affirm and deny the same thing. But one cannot deny what he affirms. Therefore, whoever grants the premises of logical reasoning cannot deny the conclusion. So the very fact that truths are implicitly contained in other truths. Okay. And then the next one, the last one, which is going to be interior to us, is going to be the inner sense. So the inner sense is the perception of material modifications to the body. So the inner sense testifies to pain and comfort, but not necessarily the cause of those. And the cause has to be gained by a process of induction. For example, I don't know, I have a certain pain on my elbow when I am sitting down and typing up these notes. I have that certain pain. My inner sense is going to testify that I then have pain. Now, let me now if I through my own faculties by a process of induction consider the cause of this pain, then I could see that it's because my elbow is, I don't know, touching the hot coffee cup next to me, so it's starting to burn my skin. So those are two distinct things, though, which is going to be very important when it comes to certain objections to the reliability of the inner sense. So, in proof of this, to say that the inner sense is not reliable in its perceptions is the same as to say that those identical affections or inner modifications of the animal body, which are perceived, do not really exist. But this cannot be said without absurdity, for to be perceived means to be that which is perceived or to exist as the object of perception. If then those affections did not really exist, they would exist and not exist, which is absurd. So, really, to deny that inner sense or the perception of the material modifications of the body would be to deny the existence of external realities to give material modifications to the body, which would be absolutely absurd. It'd just be stupid. Then continuing, so this is going to be the last slide. I thought this was a very interesting objection, and one which kind of stumped me when I first was reading this section about how this works with the feeling of the pain of an amputated limb. So how does this work with like what do they call it? Is it called like phantom limb or something? I can't. Phantom limb. Yes, phantom limb. There you go. Phantom limb syndrome is a condition in which patients experience sensations, whether painful or otherwise, in a limb that does not exist. It has been reported in over 80 to 100% of amputees, and typically has a chronic course, often resistant to treatment. Ugh, man, that would be so weird. I couldn't imagine that. If any of you have phantom limb syndrome, I'm so sorry. That sounds so weird. Okay, but the answer to this is that it testifies to the feeling of a pain we grant. And there really is a pain, but it does not testify to the exact cause of that pain. The feeling experienced now may be similar to that experienced before the limb was amputated. Then the feeling of pain arose from some lesion in that limb, and now the imagination reproducing this former relation affords us an occasion for judging that the present sensation is again owing to the limb which is no longer there. We feel a lesion which we may be inclined by the force of habit to locate in the amputated limb, whereas the nerves are affected elsewhere, namely at their extremity, which is exposed and very sensitive. That's just crazy. Is really what your mind is doing when you have phantom limb syndrome is you have a certain exterior sense, which is true, and then your mind in judging and trying to inductively judge the cause of that pain is putting it in your amputated limb, in the limb that doesn't exist, by like force of habit. It's so weird. Okay, but that is all I have for you. Thank you for coming here. And next week, I will be coming out. Bro, this is all well and good, but it doesn't erase the fact that feminist philosophers have conquered the philosophy departments across America. I mean, who cares? Let them burn. Like literally, when you have sin and wickedness, when you have great just intellectual foolishness, the snake is really going to eat its own tail, because they cannot survive this just complete denial of truth. They just can't survive it. They're just going to they're just going to fall on their own sword at this point. So let them conquer it, let them destroy it. It's just and you see it every day almost, is that the revolution that's happening is really just eating its own. And then they're just kind of killing themselves slowly over time. And that's just what is basically what we have to do is just what the great Archbishop Lefebvre. I remember Archbishop Lefebvre actually had a good section on this. Is basically just teach your kid the catechism, pray with them, and educate them. That's really it. Just get married, be a Catholic, raise a lot of kids, form Catholic community, teach them the faith, teach them philosophy. It's very important. I think definitely a solid grounding. I was thinking about this last night. Maybe I'll just pontificate at the end of the stream because I can. But the training of like high school students in philosophy, in this type of scholastic philosophy, which are taken down to the level of high schoolers, if they had that formation, it would be it would do them it would do them so much good when it comes to when they get out of when they get out of under the their parents' house and they get out into the world, into the non-Catholic world, because they're inevitably going to have to deal with it. It's just a process of being able to equip them for dealing with it, and just taking your kid to mass twice a month and then occasionally praying a rosary with him. Well, all good and dandy, all good and dandy is not really going to help form a robust Catholic who is going to be able to go out into the world to keep his faith, for one, and then for two, be able to convert others to the faith. Because this requires a lot of philosophy when it comes to fixing with the preliminaries of the faith. Just you have to completely fix so much false philosophy um, before we even start discussing the before we even start discussing theology. You're gonna have to fix a lot of it, and that's the mode in which the fathers worked often. Is they would start with a bunch of natural errors that these people are having, and then they would start to come in with the gospel after that. So these preliminaries of thought. So it's so important to teach these kids logic, to teach them metaphysics, to teach them ethics, to teach them not only teach them the theology, not only have them memorize the catechism, have them memorize their Baltimore Catechism. That's great. That's wonderful, but they really need a robust philosophical background in order to not be swept away by a lot of the false philosophy which is out there. And as Archbishop Williamson said, these modern I should clip that. Maybe I will clip that eventually. But this false philosophy just leads to all sorts of depravity that you have, and it just leads to infidelity to the faith. So it's so important to form them in good philosophy that is going to be much more robust than anything that they're going to deal with, and to be able to form no objections. Maybe that's a good project for somebody to engage in, to write a new manual of philosophy, which is going to deal with a lot of the objections which are going to arise from that people are going to hear um, from just the normal way of thinking. Because I mean, a lot of these older manuals are great, but the objections nobody's heard for like 100 years. So I don't know how useful they are. A lot of them are perpetual and interesting, but then others are completely left wanting. Are there any moments in one's existence when they can be absolutely certain of their own perceptions, other than while completing an analytic statement? So I think what you have, the issue that you're going to have with this statement, I'm going to point it right there. Wait, down there. You probably even can't see my finger. But when it comes to the way in which you're thinking of absolute certainty, is when we speak of certainty, we're going to more so speak of proper certainty. And proper certainty is going to be certainty without any reasonable doubts. So there are almost all moments of your existence, you can have proper certainty for these judgments that you're having, because you can remove all certain doubts that you have, or reasonable doubts that you have. So, like, for example, that's why Descartes' process doesn't really work out, because it's not reasonable to think that there's a demon which is infusing bad thoughts into your mind. Yeah, you, my man, write a manual of new philosophy. That's your job, Christian B. Wagner. So true, King. So true. I will. I that would be fun. That would take reading a lot of. Actually, honestly, most of the time now, It's really just thinking about it when it comes to philosophy. A lot of it is going to be just being in the world, because a lot of these objections, a lot of these ideas are controversial, and there's common objections that you're just going to get with talking to like normal people out there. So a lot of these are going to arise. So so yeah, that's it. But I have pontificated for too long. So I will see all of you kings later. I don't. Where is it? There it is. Oh wait, remember it's Trinity tide. So we worship one God in Trinity and Trinity in unity.